Hi, everyone, and welcome to Legacy Live. My name is Kiana London, and I serve as the Donor Development Director for Legacy of Hope Foundation. I'm so grateful to be with you all today for our next session in this monthly series. Over the next hour, we'll be diving into a powerful theme, healing the whole child, our 5-point care plan. We'll walk through how Legacy of Hope provides not only shelter and safety, but trauma-informed, holistic care that addresses 5 critical areas: spiritual, educational, psychological, social, and physical well-being. Joining me today is our co-founder and executive director, Marianne. Thank you so much for being with us today, Marianne.
My pleasure, as always.
So you'll hear from her throughout the session as we explore real stories, therapeutic approaches, and the heart of what makes our model different. We'll also share a transparent breakdown of how donor support powers this model. And we'll leave time at the end for your questions. So please feel free to add any questions to the chat or to reach out to us directly after the session. Let's begin. Okay. So, who we are, we're Legacy of Hope, and we have been serving children who are abandoned, abused, or otherwise in some kind of emergency situation. In 2024 alone, we provided emergency protection and care for 211 children. Each one came to us with a different story, but all with the same need: holistic healing. We support abandoned and vulnerable children in Honduras through foster care, crisis care, and family preservation initiatives. We also empower our community through comprehensive training programs. In our last session, we spoke about TBRI, trust-based relational interventions, and how we train our team, our community, schools, and organizations in our area in best practices. We also offer virtual training, so should your school or your organization be interested, please reach out to us. Since our founding in 2011, our mission has been to help children heal, to achieve permanency, and reach their full potential. We accomplish this by holistically addressing each child's spiritual, physical, educational, psychological, and social needs. So, what makes our work unique? Here, we follow a model rooted in trauma-informed practices. It's inspired by early pioneers like Back Ministries, who started looking at healing as a holistic venture in 1997. We go beyond food and shelter. Our model integrates all 5 areas of care as you see on this wheel here: spiritual, educational, emotional, physical, and social, because we believe that each element is critical for restoring a child's sense of dignity, their sense of agency, and their long-term potential. When children experience felt safety, so not just like physical safety, of course, that's so critical to their well-being, but when children experience physiological, psychological, and emotional safety, their brains begin to heal. This is what we do at Legacy of Hope. We're helping our children tap into the potential of both their brains and bodies, healing holistically so that their capacity to learn and relate can transform. And this is truly what the 5-point child development plan is all about, as introduced by Back Ministries, but carried forward through the understanding of what we see day to day and how we train our caretakers and caregivers like Tia's, as you heard in our first session, what a critical role that they play in the lives of our children. So we're really making sure that our caregivers are equipped to focus on each aspect of a child's well-being. So this might seem familiar, but often we focus on a hierarchy of needs. As seen here, this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the understanding of foundational needs. But we also want to acknowledge that there are different ways that we come to this point of self-actualization. There was a model laid out by the Siksika Blackfoot Indigenous group, and in their perspective, they sort of flip it on its head. In Maslow's, we see that physical needs are first, and they're kind of leading in a period towards self-actualization. The Siksika tribe believed that self-actualization actually comes within a more collectively responsible model. And so this is sort of what we reflect as well. We're always trying to tease out, what are the best ways and best methods to care for a whole being and to allow that child in our case feel empowered to be themselves. So, in a collectively responsible model, there's not one exact endpoint, but rather we're resonating with a more circular, holistic, kind of more all-encompassing model. So, we're connecting the care that we offer for our children to really this sense of esteem and love and belonging and social wellness as an equal part of the pie of also physical needs, spiritual needs, and their educational well-being. So this is like a quick overview of what we use as our model and how it has been related to kind of other needs models in the development of child's well-being. So as we dive into each aspect of our 5-point care plan, you'll hear more specifics, how we do things, and as well as stories of, what our kids are experiencing each day. So I'll pass it to Marianne to start explaining the foundational aspects of the 5-point child development model.
Thank you. I also just want to kind of reiterate that we often say, and I think I said last time with TBRI, that for our children, harm often happens within the context of relationship. And so it's important for us that we are forming healthy relationships so that the healing can happen within the context of those safe and supportive relationships. And part of those relations are with the tias in the home, but then also bringing the larger community inside the walls. So when we think about spiritual and educational components, we incorporate local churches and other groups within the community that are able to invest in the lives of our children. And going back to that felt safety, right? So you may know that the child is safe. I may know that the child is safe, but if they don't feel safe, then their brain is not able to access that executive functioning and be able to integrate some new ideas. So helping them to connect, identify first, and then connect with safe adults outside the walls is very important. Educationally, due to the nature of the cases, a lot of our children are not able to leave the safety of our walls because their testimonies may be influenced or affected. And so for the judicial process, what we do is we can provide tutoring. And so we partner with the local church, we partner with the local universities for practicum students to be able to come in and come alongside of our children to help them to continue on their educational journey. And most often that is closing huge gaps. We have children who are in their teens and have never learned to read or write their name. And so just spending the time with them to help teach them the basics and give them this new self-esteem where they before they thought I couldn't, and now they understand that they can. It is, of course, our dream to be able to have a full-time teacher, but unfortunately, that's just not in the budget. But it's a starting point for us to be able to collaborate with people in the community to provide those needs. Um, it's it's always a joy for me as an educator in my first passion to see our children achieve new heights educationally because it really opens a whole new world. It's a ticket to somewhere that they were not able to go before. We recently had a girl who was rescued from trafficking. And while she was in our care, she discovered that she was pregnant. And she said to me, Miss Marianne, I guess you heard the news. And I said, yeah, I did. And we're going to be here to accompany you this. And what are your dreams? What do you want to do? And she was so taken back and confused. Like, what do you mean what am I going to do? Like, I just have to be a mom now. And I said, no, that doesn't limit. You can still continue. You can study. You can continue to work towards your educational dreams. And she was completely shocked. She thought in her mind that the pregnancy was the end of her educational journey, even really before it had even started. Um, she had only achieved the second or the third grade, and she was 15 years old. So we were able to reignite that dream and say, education is within your reach. And that's so important for us to provide these opportunities so that our kiddos know that they have voice and choice in their futures. The spiritual component is also very important. There's so much research now that actually helps us to conceptualize and understand the value of connecting our souls in the healing journey. And a lot of our children have been so alone in their trauma, in their hurt. But the one person that was with them, accompanying them in those really difficult moments was God. And so allowing them to explore that more, to join and to have the Tias come alongside and pray with them, to have the brothers and sisters in the home at that time join and unify their voices in praying for things that are important to them is so important in their healing journey. So that's just two ways that we address the spiritual and educational care of our children.
And it's so powerful, the each case that we see in each child is so unique to what their needs are. But I think that what Legacy of Hope does so well is really open the eyes to what's possible. Even when that child, as you were explaining with this young pregnant teen, that might not even be on their radar or on the horizon of a possibility. And really, what Legacy of Hope and what we do, what we dedicate our time toward, is making sure anyone who comes through our care knows that this is just a difficult part of your journey, but your horizon is so broad. And truly, not only, within the ways that feel empowering, but there is a whole aspect of our work that's very focused on individual rights and what children have rights to. One of them being, two of them being spiritual and educational support and access.
Absolutely. Mhm.
And then we'll move to psychological and social support. These are two major components to our 5-point plan as well.
Yeah. And I think many people think about the psychological support right away when they hear children who've experienced trauma. And as you may remember from our previous discussions, trauma doesn't just affect the mind, trauma is stored at the cellular level. And so it's something that's actually happening physiologically in our bodies. And so we want to make sure that we are using evidence-based practices that we know will actually help our children to begin their healing process. And so, because every person is different and every person's experience is different, there's not a one size fits all therapy. And so we have different modalities that we are able to use and choose from. We do art therapy, sound therapy, music therapy. We, of course, do talk therapy and traditional kinds of psychoeducation and other kinds of psychotherapy that have, as I said, evidence-based research backing their use. We do some tapping and some bilateral stimulation to help the brain to begin to process and to help to get our kiddos out of that fight, flight, fear mode, right? Because the strategies that have kept them alive until that moment have been so important for them to live. But now that they are safe, we can begin to help them to step into the present, to have some awareness, to be grounded in the moment, to understand, to communicate to their brain and to their bodies that they are safe now. And so we use various modalities of interventions in order to do that. And then the second part there is the social support. And again, as I mentioned before, using local churches, using local community groups that have been vetted, that we have good relationships with, that we have trained in trauma-informed care, coming in and investing in the lives of the children, say, inside these walls, there are safe people that are going to accompany you in your healing journey. But one day you're going to go and be with safe family members, or you're going to go to a permanent place where there are safe people that can accompany you. But here's how you can identify these people. And here are some people that love you, that care about you. There's an important statistic that says one safe adult is all it takes to make the difference in the life of a child. And so when our children move on, it's important for them to know that there are other safe adults in the community that are thinking about them, that care about them, and that can be a resource for them. We recently had the opportunity to go to a movie theater. It was a fundraiser that we did with our community, and it was so beautiful to be able to see the kids just like take this experience, and many of them for the very first time, to be able to see a movie, to interact with people in the community, and to have those really positive experiences, forming new neural connections within their brain.
Yeah, it's just so such an example of within this photo of everyone seeing Moana 2 together and really being present in a space that is so, in very privileged settings feels very normalized, right? Going to the movie, getting
Sure. Mhm.
popcorn, getting candy, and being with your friends. And I think what is really joyous about this photo and the example of the ways that our kids are developing really leaps and bounds socially are being able to share that experience with their peers as well. So we do such an intentional job at Legacy of Hope of making sure that, struggles can be shared and that joys can be shared as well, and that the kids are really gaining the tools to have those collective experiences. And on the right, we can see part of, our theory and method of care is being really ingrained in their own daily routines. And so here you see kids a part of the process of making food and making tortillas and learning from their tias, just what's the best way, what's the right masa to water ratio, and what should the texture be like. And this is another way of learning both amongst their peers, but also tactilely and learning by doing lots of the daily practices that are a part of living a healthy and fulfilled life.
Yeah, I think there's so much happening in these pictures that maybe we don't see. I mean, first of all, like you said, it's a sensory activity. It's activating those parts of the brain that actually help us to process trauma. It's a creative kind of activity, right? And every child is gonna make a tortilla a little bit different.
Yeah.
It's also a social message. Right. We have a lot of children that come from places where it is the woman's job to make the tortillas, to cook, to take care of the men, of the children. And if you see here, you see some little boys learning to make tortillas. And the message here is that together, we can do things. We are stronger. We can help one another. And that's a very important message for all of our children to store in their memories, in their bodies, and to take with them in the next stages of their healing journey. So it's a social message. It's a sensory activity. It is a way to collaborate, but there's also something else. There's self-esteem, right? Have you ever tried something new? And for a lot of these children, it's the first time that they're learning to do something new. And when you succeed and you're able to get that tortilla just right, there's a lot of pride. And a lot of times you'll hear the kids say, which one is mine? I want to eat my tortilla, the one that I
Yeah.
made, right? And so there's so much happening in these photos that is really important and contributing to the healing journey of our children.
Absolutely. And even just that pride. So it's so, I'll bring us into kind of the physical care and our daily routines, but part of that pride goes along with play as well. And here you'll see a group of mostly, I think all boys. Yeah,
Yeah,
all
we've
boys.
had so many boys lately.
I know. And I think it's so really joyous just to observe that the boys who can be aged very quickly out of their these vulnerable stages because of the hard places that they're coming from oftentimes are expected to present in a certain and very gender specific way. But I loved what you just said about tortillas because cooking and making sure that things in the home are taken care of often can fall to the female roles, and what we're teaching and really exemplifying within boys is that you get to do all of it. You can do all of it and you can have such pride and such joy in everything that you do, and you get to be a kid here. And I think that that is really powerful, really essential to their development and to really this space to allow their brains to imagine positive futures. Um,
Yeah, I like how you said that. It is essential. The play element is so essential in healing. And yes, of course, when we're talking about children who have been parentified, we're talking about children who have, in effect, lost so much or never had to begin with a childhood. But I just want to take that to our listeners right now. Play is therapeutic. Every person should be doing something that is true play every single day. It is life-giving. It is, as you said, essential, not just for children from hard places, but for all of us to be able to allow our bodies and our minds to just relax and to enjoy, and especially if you can connect with another person, right? To enjoy those kinds of experiences.
Yeah, I love that. I think to all of our listeners and folks who will listen later, question yourself. And I'm questioning myself right now. What have I done in the last week that really feels like play? And what do I plan to do? How do we all incorporate play into our routines so that we're tapping into that aspect of such essential development as well? And our kids have very structured play, and very structured sort of physical activity. But they also have free ability to imagine and create and be. And, oftentimes we do things before we know what we're doing in play situations. And that type of growth and expansion is so important for our brains. So along with, this free play time, our kids in our care also have a daily exercise routine, which is so fun to watch. I get lots of videos of just like following along to different dance moves or doing, jumping jacks in a circle and that kind of physical activity in a group setting is also, so affirming to kids that they're capable, that their bodies can do these certain things. And sometimes the kids that we have been told, through systems of abuse or violence, that their bodies are only used for certain things. And so our message and our methods are to make sure that our kids know their bodies are their own, that they protect them, that they take care of them, and through routines of hygiene and of regular great nutrition and of choice, that they are now determining how their body feels and moves in the world. So on one side, we also have a libro de recetas, which is just a book of recipes, and our kids at Legacy of Hope have the ability to plan for what meals are upcoming. So, of course, we need to plan ahead because we need to order everything properly. But our kids can choose and they know that they have access to different types of food. And within that agency, they're also have the voice building that if they're not feeling well, they can say, I'm sick, and we have medical checkups and we have regular access to medical care as guided by our team on the ground, but where they are believed. And so we're wanting our kids to really feel like both in play, in exercise, in feeding their body, in cleaning their body, that they have agency and they have control and power, and that they can reclaim that control when they're in our care. So
Yeah. I
yeah.
think what I like and what I hear you saying there and pointing out is voice. And I think voice and choice are so important. So within being a part of a community that has choice about what we're going to eat, their voice is heard that says, I like this food or I don't like this food. Collaborating. What we're helping children is to rediscover their voice or discover their voice for the first time and understand that safe adults hear your words. Safe adults respond to those words in appropriate ways. So, like
Mhm.
you said, whether it's choosing meals, whether it's collaborating in activities, or whether it's saying, hey, I don't feel well. And for the
Mhm.
first time, having somebody say, you don't, what do you need? Do you have a fever? Let me see. Do you have a scrape? Let me clean that and put a band-aid on. There's so many children who've never experienced the loving, tender care of a safe adult. I'm reminded of some of my first months and years in Honduras where I volunteered at a children's home, and I had a small group of preschoolers. And I would go and do preschool early intervention kinds of classes. And the one day I came, and almost all of the kids were sick with a virus. And what I saw were 4 and 5 year olds holding each other and trying to soothe each other because there was no adult. And so our body seeks that care. And when there's not an adult, right, we try to find ways to have that need met. And sadly, in this institution, there was no safe adult attending. They just kind of let all of the kids go into the play area and close them in there. And there you saw them soothing each other. And so for the first time that day, all I did was sit and provide care. And I was holding 5 and 6 little preschoolers on my feverish heads and everything. But in that moment, the child was learning what it feels like to be cared for by an adult on that, changing that schema, right? Like, and there are adults that see and hear and can provide for my needs. And that's such important work, rewiring the brain of the children that we serve to let them know that safe adults hear your voice and will meet your needs.
Absolutely. I think that reflection and story is so powerful, and just the imagination, like I can picture kids taking care of kids. It happens all over the world. And it too places a sense of pressure on the child who are slightly older or slightly more well to then become the caregiver when they haven't learned those tools themselves. And so it's just so critical that there are consistent, safe adults. And this is what we show all of our kids at Legacy of Hope, that your needs will be met. So, how are we meeting those needs? Um, we have uh, we have a complicated array of how we are able to fund the needs of each kid in our care. And so I want to show some how kind of numbers break down in the ways that we pay attention to each one of these five the 5 points of the care plan, and also give uh, some sort of sobering numbers to the difficulties of funding the level of care that we offer and that we will never compromise on. So per month, about 10,000, it's down in the bottom corner, but about 10,000 US dollars go toward our operational expenses. So that is caregiver salaries. This is any type of training that we need to offer to make sure that our best practices are being met. This is Social Security and electricity and internet, accounting, and really everything that makes the organization function, and so that we can get to the next day. Um, and then about 2,300 goes toward supporting therapy and psychological services. And about 500, which might seem low in our breakdown, but about 500 goes toward education and school materials. These things are reused, and so this number might seem low in the pie, but is actually our thrifty ability to make sure that educational resources, if they're at the level of a new kid, that they're being used again. And thankfully, we have tutors that are working on a volunteer basis. And one of our major pushes this year, and if you can be a part of this push as a partner, we would be so grateful, is to hire a full-time educator so that all of these massive gaps in education that we experience in our kids can be filled, and that they can move up to the level of educational development that is closest to their age range.
I
So,
just want to hop in there and
yeah.
just add one thing about education. So, the reason why it's important for us to have somebody on staff is because children who've experienced trauma often do not cannot learn in the same ways. And even the tutors that we bring in and train are still learning. And so they are not as effective as somebody who really has a good base and understanding. And unfortunately, the public school system and largely the private school system is underfunded, undertrained in these areas as well. And so I think it's important for just to throw that out there that our kids are not typical learners. They are very neurodivergent because of their life experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And the need that our kids have and that we have as an organization is high so that we can meet the expectations that our kids will be entering into a school setting that is adaptive to what how they are processing. And so, most programs start at the physical, but we wanted to start with sort of other aspects to really show that that the physical is part of a whole. And in our physical needs, we spend about 6,000 US dollars per month in food, clothing, medical care, kind of anything that is attending to their physical needs. And then the our spiritual programming is really incorporated within other aspects of this care plan and their daily practices. So a lot of those enrichment activities are really built in and then financially covered through other parts of our budget. But every
Yeah.
dollar that you see here truly touches every child that's in our care. And so, whether you're sponsoring one therapy session or a medical visit or a caregiver's training, you know and can be very confident that you are changing their story. So, when we think about investing in the whole child, we average around 20,000 US dollars for all of our operations. That's per month. And if we break this down into kind of how much we invest in each child's per month, it's about 435 US dollars. So when we frame that in really within a context of both what we are capable financially of offering and within the context of what children might see and what kinds of care they might receive in other places. 435 US dollars is actually quite high for an abandoned and orphaned or orphan child that we are receiving within our care. And we do get the question, how do we do this? Why do we do this? Why are we spending so much really relatively per child within our care? And our answer is that we're not compromising on quality. So this amount of money, and again, it's all relative. This could be a very easy or affordable amount to donate per month. And for that, we would say deeply thank you. But this amount of money also offers each child within our care the ability to have a one-on-one experience with their caregivers and trusted adults. It allows them to have smaller social settings so that the kids don't feel like they're just part of a system and moving through without that attention and love. And that we're really modeling what healthy and very whole and safe families look like so that eventually the children in our care can go on to replicate this model within their own families of the future.
Yeah.
So
And I just tag on there and say, these numbers can fluctuate depending on the children that we receive. So, again, reminding our listeners that the majority of the children that we care for are coming directly from the crisis. They are not coming often. With sometimes even shoes on their feet. So they're coming with the clothes on their back, sometimes shoes, big medical, sexually transmitted diseases, lice, all kinds of skin issues, which are treated within those first 30 days. And so the average stay of a child, maybe 3 or 4 months in our care before they're able to be transitioned to safe family members. So it's a very triage situation. And every time we receive a new child, a big investment happens. Also, in the last several months, we have had a ton of babies. And for anybody out there with little ones, you may know that diapers and wipes and formula are really high ticket items. And so that is reflected in these numbers as well. And the final thing that I do want to add on there is that this quality care is noticed. So
Mm.
our children and youth in our region don't want to work with anyone else. They want the children to be able to receive this kind of care because it's effective, it's healing. You can see the difference that these kinds of interventions make. And our local children and youth office will tell you that anybody who walks in is actually able to notice the difference that these types of interventions, while a higher cost than just providing for physical needs, we are actually promoting change and reintegrating children in hold and healed ways.
Absolutely. Right. It just struck me when you said you can see the change. Um, that I was reflecting on a moment that I was in Honduras and a sibling group came in and was very just really dirty from being on the street and had ripped clothes and were fearful because they couldn't know what to expect, what was coming at Legacy of Hope. So we're really looking at and relying on each other to provide that comfort. And then once they were in our care, I saw them the following day, and within a day, just the brightness in their faces and a feeling of hope because they were treated with dignity, with clean clothes, with the ability to take a shower and take care of their hygiene, with a stuffed animal that is theirs that they can connect with, and new Crocs and things um, that do require, the investment from all of you as our donors and our donor sort of portfolio of funders, but that really fill, or I guess just bridge the gap of getting a child to a place where they can understand that they're in a safe and loving environment. And so to stay on our funding streams for a moment of really just how do we make this happen, it is from a number of different actors. So we do get government funding, and we're grateful for the Honduran government for their support. We're funded by individual donors, many like yourselves, who are willing to really be partners with us in this work. We have institutional and church-based donors, and then we have NGOs and other foundations who support our work. But these funding streams are not always reliable and consistent. So a huge effort in making sure that our operations and what we do so well can continue is making sure that we have robust funding streams that are able to are able to really relieve any of our stresses that, and we have many, and able to, say that this is the important work that you're doing. We have evidence that shows us that this is making a difference. Currently, our just the reality of the way that government funding is working in Honduras at the moment is that there are massive time gaps. So right now, we are well into, we're into the second half of the year and have not been paid the expected and agreed upon amounts by the Honduran government since February. So that is a huge amount of months that we have not seen the financial stability that we are expecting, that we, were promised and are expecting within our agreements. And so it really makes it a, a very tricky and stressful situation for everyone on our team. Um,
Yeah. Because the costs don't stop, right? You still have to pay caregivers. We're still receiving children. So even though the income that was expected is not arriving, the costs still arrive, as do
yeah.
the children. Yeah.
Yes, and as you were mentioning, Marianne, is like the within our region and really within the country, we're becoming a model for others to look to. Some of the transition stories that we've had, because our kids feel so loved and so secure, they are able to move forward with their lives. And one of the workers with the Child and Youth Services department who accompanied our psychologist to the first real transition of one of the kids in our care to their new adoptive parents. What she was commenting that it just went so well because our kids have that confidence within themselves that they can be loved again, that they are loved, and that their new homes and new families are safe for them. So it makes a massive difference what we do. And it really requires us to have these funding streams put in place and growing. So this is really our this is the 5-point child development plan that we use, that we employ, and that we rely on heavily because we just have seen the ways that it changes the lives of the kids in our care. And as we were talking about, what goes into this type of self-actualization or knowledge of oneself or agency or protecting our own rights, um, we're discussing different models and also explaining why we use our holistic approach. So at this point, if there are any questions, we're available. I actually have one question for Marianne, and just always love relying on her expertise in this field and experience doing it successfully for a long time and bringing a lot of our team and our community members along the way. Um, we also really encourage and welcome all of your questions, whether it's in this session or in the future. So please don't hesitate to ask. So my question for you, Marianne, is um, really around what do you think success looks like for a child in our care? And how important are our methods in breaking these long-term cycles of dysfunction and abuse?
Yeah. So that's a big question. And I would say that success to me for the children that we serve is the same for my own children. I want to be able to raise and care for children who have voice, who can use their voice to negotiate their needs in healthy ways, who can seek help and feel okay about asking for help when it's necessary. Um, because they are going to be able to not only function well themselves, but they're going to be able to contribute to a better, more successful, safe society. And the second part of that question, I think, is all about systemic change, right? So, first of all, we're plugging kiddos back into a system that now have agency, they have voice, they have self esteem, they know their rights.
Mm.
But it requires us to look at not just the symptoms, but to look at the root causes. And there's this story I heard a long time ago. I don't even remember, but it was a man, there was a river, and there were all these people, and they saw the babies floating down the stream, and they were scooping out the babies and handing them to the next person, and they were saving all these babies that were coming down the stream. But then at some point, somebody said, hey, we ought to go upstream and see what's happening, that all of these babies keep coming downriver.
Mm,
And so for me, I don't just want to be a part of this solution, right? How do we serve and care for orphaned and vulnerable children? I would like to look at prevention. How can we empower and prevent these kinds of situations from happening in the first place? And that means coming alongside of families
mm,
to give them individualized service plans and saying, what is it that you think that you need? How can we help to empower you? It means coming alongside of government organizations to equip, empower, to educate. It means coming up alongside the local school, the hospital, community organizations in order to begin to empower people to understand the root causes and to begin to work at shifting the way that we approach these things to create systemic change. I think, when you think about, oh, what can you tell me a success story, right?
yeah.
Probably you would think about a child that went back home and finished their schooling and graduated from university, and we have those stories. But there's this story that's coming in my mind right now, and it's actually of a little girl who came back into care. And so
Mhm,
our desire is always that a child goes to a safe place and that they are well cared for. But
mhm,
in this story, the child came back into care
mhm,
within the same year, but she came back into care because she used her voice to say, hey, this is what's happening to me is not okay. This is against my rights. And she marched herself right down to the police station. She filed a police report because she understood what her rights were. She understood how to use the system in order to protect herself and there was actually some other siblings involved as well this time. And so that is also a success story when we have a child that says, no, I'm breaking this cycle. I choose something different, and I know what I need to do in order to protect myself. And so while it's not ideal, and while yes, it was difficult and hard for her to experience that re-victimization, in
mhm.
many senses she was not allowing herself to be re-victimized. She was able to take control. And that,
Mhm.
Kiana, is systemic change. A
Oh,
child who felt
yes.
powerless
Yeah.
understood that she had power to change what was happening, and a system that responded to her voice in safe and appropriate ways.
That is huge. That is the absolute like core of what success looks like in a space where she is now treating herself with dignity. When we talk about agency and dignity, this is, the perfect example of what happens when a child has that voice and can use it. And I think that's just an absolutely perfect, or it's just a very powerful example of success. And this really is why we always say healing isn't linear, and it requires all of us to be dedicated to the long term and for our community to be so involved. Thank you so much for sharing that, Marianne. Thank you for your time today. We will be following up with this session recording, sent to you all and located on our YouTube channel, so that if you're ever questioning, what was that thing that they said about uh psychosocial, care, or the importance of sensory therapy. You can have these resources to come back to. We really hope that you join us for future sessions and consider becoming a monthly donor or a one-time donor, whatever suits and fits, your engagement. We are just so grateful for the partners that we have, and we encourage you to spread the word to a friend or family member who's interested. And just please reach out to stay engaged. Healing takes time, it takes community, but we see with the investments that we offer and the methods that we employ that our kids are doing well, and that they're feeling empowered to be themselves. So thank you so much for joining, and we will catch you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.